So when parents step up to say, I don't like this, I don't think this is the role of school. And by the way, this takes up an enormous amount of time, energy, and money when the kids aren't really learning their academic subjects very well. The people trying to gaslight you and soften you up and soften you up and sort you do it again. They move the ball farther down the field by now saying, here we go again with these people. When gaslighting fails, does it really fail? If it made you feel crazy, if it made you come out of your shell and go to a school board meeting and speak out and put your friendships, your job, your reputation on the line on behalf of your kid, to the point where you inspired hundreds, possibly thousands of other people to do the same, and more people become aware of what's going on in our schools and even vote accordingly, has the narrative failed? Now, if you like the outcome of elections because you spoke out, or you like all the new friends you've made, or you like the new alliances you've formed and the feeling that you're not alone anymore, then for you, it certainly hasn't failed in the short run. But what about for the narrative crafters? Did it fail? It's tempting to think it did. It's tempting to think, look, it failed. We didn't buy their BS. Look at us organizing. Look at us showing up. Look at us and all the progress we're making. We even elected a bunch of people who appear to be on our side. Whether or not they can actually affect change where we need it to happen at the school and classroom level is undetermined at this point, but we're having an impact. So look at us. And you're tempted to think the people crafting the narrative have failed. But I'm going to suggest to you today that they didn't fail at all. That even the success you feel right now is a win for them. And you're probably thinking, that doesn't make sense, Deb. How can that be? What do you mean it's a win for them? Well, it all depends on what they're trying to do. Now, if you thought they were actually trying to persuade you, or anyone else for that matter, that you were wrong, and there's no critical theory in the classroom, no critical race theory, no critical theory, period, that all they're trying to do is help the students. If you actually believed they thought they were going to persuade you, then you might think, sure, yeah, they failed. They didn't persuade me. And even the people who already agree with them primarily politically and probably know, wink, wink, nod, nod, they're full of crap. They just don't care. There might be some who actually believe them because they're not looking past the Twitter feed, but I would venture to guess no. Most people who tell you you're wrong or you're imagining things are just gaslighting right along with them. But the reason I don't think they failed is I don't think their goal was to persuade you. I don't think their goal was to persuade anybody. I don't think they believed a word of it or expected anybody to believe a word of it. What I do think they expected is what all gaslighters expect, that you would be so frustrated and outraged at their attempt, their brazenness, of their attempt to lie, to say, don't believe your lying eyes, that you get worked up and you do exactly what you did. You'd come out of the dark, you stick your neck out, identify yourselves by name, organize all the other people who agree with you by name, make yourselves known and visible to the state and everybody else who wants to know who you are, so they can get a sense of the size and the scope of the problem they face as they pursue their ultimate goal. This was another sorting. And as I've said on this channel before, if you keep playing this game, you're going to ultimately lose. The only way to win is not to play. So if you keep thinking you're going to get ahead of them or you're going to win these victories and you'll eventually just win more victories than they do and you'll win, you're wrong. You see, you're the Rebel Alliance and they are the Empire. And unless and until you blow up the Death Star And even then, maybe not. But that would be a prerequisite. And you're not even close to the Death Star. You don't seem to really understand where it is and what it looks like. And I'm not saying this to be critical or mean. And I'm not saying I don't celebrate with you when, somebody else gets elected. And I'm not saying I don't hope I'm wrong and there's no possibility I'm wrong. Well, there's a possibility I'm wrong. I just don't think I am. I hope I am, but I don't think I am. Because you see, I think the ultimate goal is, as they've sort of said all along, that your children belong to them being the state. You are not the ones who should be determining how your kids are educated. And they've said it here and there. Individuals loyal to the state have said it. And you thought, well, that's that individual, or that's that small group, that's the teachers unions, or that's the Democratic politicians, or that's it. No. You see, this isn't a political problem. This is a problem of culture. This is a worldview problem. You have people who absolutely believe it's appropriate for the state to decide what children learn because parents will get it wrong. And you have people who don't. And you probably belong, if you're watching this, you probably belong to the group of people who don't think that. But your kids are still in the custody of the state all day. And you're fighting to keep that program in place. You just want more control over the system where the government is in control of your kids all day. You want more of a partnership. You think that's possible. You believe it ever was possible. It ever existed. And that there just wasn't a small glimmer of time when the state's interests and parents' interests were aligned. So it seemed like parents were partners. Seemed. And yet we still ended up here. So much for partnership, right? How'd that happen? So either parents just fell asleep on the job completely and checked out, which, I suppose is possible, or it was never true in the first place, or some combination of the two. I would go with it was never true in the first place, and parents fell asleep on the job. But that was first. So my argument is it's still a win for the people who crafted the narrative that there's no critical race theory in schools. If you say there is, you're racist. But by the way, you should want it there. You just don't want a real history taught, etc. So crazy making, and for the purpose of drawing you out and sorting. Who buys our BS? Who's on our side? Or at least, will allow us to spew our BS because it suits their purposes. And who doesn't? Where are they? What are their names? What do they look like? What do they sound like? How do they vote? Etc. Who are their kids? Who are their kids? And when the expiration date came around on that narrative, and it was bound to come because you can't hide reality forever, they moved on to the next one, which I'm going to talk about today. But before I move on to that, let's just remember that the reason they do these things in stages is the same reason that narcissistic abusers don't come right out of the gate on your second date and say, yeah, I'm going to need you to never speak to your family again and dump all of your friends, give me all of your money, and basically turn your entire life over to me because I know better than you and you don't know how to live your life because you are a pathetic loser. They don't do that on the second date. They don't even do that on the 20th date. It's a series of slow drip campaigns of love bombing and gaslighting and crazy making and abuse and things where they gradually, ever so gradually, separate you from your support system, draw you out, pull you in, then trample you again. And by the time they're done with you, you can't get away without cutting off your limbs. Like you're in a bear trap and you're going to have to cut off your leg to escape, okay? So this is the same thing, only on a much larger scale. And your children are the hook. They want to own your children because if they own your children, they own the future. They actually own you in the present because you're so worried about the future. So now they've drawn you out because they couldn't roll out the tanks a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago and say, so we're going to need you to hand over your kids because we know what's best. We'll parent them. We'll raise them. We'll put them in a little dorm. We'll hand them back to you when they're 18. And if they still like you, awesome. If they don't, too bad, so sad. They didn't belong to you in the first place. They belong to the collective. It takes a village, don't you know? They can't do that yet. We still at least have the illusion of being a free people. We have a constitution. And, most of us aren't willing to just go and do that. Believe it or not, there probably are some who would. Who'd be like, really? Boarding school? Free? Awesome. You're going to make sure my kid is, and they would tell them all kinds. They're going to be a wonderful, decent, caring, loving individual who has not a shred of racism, and they'll have all the skills, and they'll be ready for the 21st century job program, blah, blah, blah. They would have packaged it and sold it to you like it was Shangri freaking law. Free prep school. And yes, there would be parents who would sign right up for that. Oh my God, the government's going to go, take care of my kids from the time they're 6 until they're 18. And, I can see them at night and everything, but come and visit, but they're going to get out. It's going to be all free. Of course, it's not free. Taxes would have been up, but whatever, we'll take care of it. You all can go and pursue your happiness while we raise your kids for you. There will always be a percentage of people who would love that. But there'll also always be a percentage of people who say, are you insane? No. And I would say that percentage is bigger, much bigger than the other percentage. Let's say it's 80-20. Okay? So they couldn't do that. Certainly couldn't do it day 1, year 5 even. But if they gradually wear you down. So first, let's see, we'll close the schools so that you lose your job or have your career on hold or your whole life is in turmoil because your kids are in the house all day and you have to find some other solution. But we'll deliver this half-assed education online. You'll sit in front of a computer, kid will sit in front of a computer and become a little vegetable. And you'll scream, but mental health will be cut off. And oh no, don't you see the harm you're doing? Don't you see the harm you're doing? And they'll say, what are you talking about? You're overreacting. This is not harmful. Would you rather they die? Would you rather they get a virus and they get sick and they die? You just want to kill people, don't you? That was the first narrative. You want the schools open because you want to kill people. You want to kill teachers. You want to kill your kid, or you want to kill other people's kid. You want to kill the grandma that lives at home with the other kid, whatever. That was the first narrative of why it was okay to close the schools, and they ignored mental health. Mental health problems, you're hyperbolic. Don't be ridiculous. It's much more deadly that they will, be exposed to this horrible thing, which we know they're statistically immune to, but whatever. Okay, so then they open up. Now, it's masks and other things. Please let them not have the masks. No. And it's the same story. You just hate blah, 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 blah. So they're drawing you out. Who are the people complaining? Because there'll always be a percentage of people who didn't complain about any of it. And then there'll be people who will complain about the schools being closed. But once the schools are open, they're like, yay, go. And they're done. And then you have the people who are looking over their shoulders when the kids were home going, I'm sorry, what? And they're teaching you what? And that group of people had to, force them to reach into their little narrative kit and be like, all right. Predictably, here come the people who don't like what we're teaching. So what do we got ready? All right, we got ready that they're racist, they're xenophobic, they're homophobic, they're transphobic, they're phobic. Okay. So they pull that out. And or you're an anti-vaxxer, and or you're, conspiracy, and you're an Alex Jones devotee, whatever, because maybe you're also concerned about the health thing. So they got their two narratives going about how you are the problem and not them. And this is the crazy making. This is the gaslighting. You're looking at stats and going, but they're not statistically at risk. I don't understand. Scary stuff. Joe Biden whispering into a microphone. So, okay. You come out. You scream into a microphone yourself. You alert them to who you are. Oh, letters go out. The DOJ gets involved. You form groups. You're identified. But the expiration date rolls around. Okay, well, we've exhausted the utility of that narrative. What else we got? What we got? Oh, okay. So now they're complaining about the mental health stuff that we got going on in the schools. Right, yeah. Never mind that we said there wouldn't be mental health issues. Never mind that we said that was all in their imagination and had nothing to do with the schools being closed, whatever. We're going to just flip that 180 degrees and say, all the COVID lockdowns and all this COVID stuff has been so COVID stress, COVID stress, trauma, crisis, mental health. We have to do mental health all the time. And now the parents are like, am I insane? Or did the same people who told us that we were being hyperbolic crazy people 6 months ago about mental health, they're now saying it's got to be mental health all the time. And now we're the problem with the mental health stuff. We weren't talking about them solving mental health problems. We were talking about them opening the school and not causing them. So now they've helped create a problem and they claim they're going to be the solution, the same people who created the problem. We didn't create the problem. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? This wasn't because of law. This is on the state of the world and racism, especially all the racism that these poor children are seeing as you scream into the microphone. See, it's your fault still. And like the narcissistic abusers they are, they flip it around on you again. You did that. Wasn't I? We didn't do anything. What? You did this. Parents, especially you racist parents. And now that you've made yourself so public, the kids pay attention. They know that their classmates' parents and maybe even their classmates agree. And now they're stressed out and they're traumatized and everything because of the fear of you and your children and your terrible wrong think. And we need to address this in the schools. It's really not fair if we don't. And if you're protesting it, well, now you are the problem. So we have headlines like parents protesting critical race theory, identify another target mental health programs. This was all by design. This is all by design. Because each time they pull another narrative out of their kit, it's going to pull more parents out. It's going to help them sort some more. They keep fine-tuning the sorting to find out who are the enemies and how much are they, what are they willing to do and so forth. But the ultimate goal is to own the kids' minds. So the family is not in the way of their messages so that these little future voters, soon to be, if they're close to 18, will vote appropriately in 2024. Ding, ding, ding. Catching on. Are you catching on? Okay. So now you step up and you say, I don't think school is the place, especially since we think it caused some of these problems. We don't think that these are the people to be talking to our kids about mental health issues, especially because the way you're going about it seems less focused on helping the kids cope with existing problems and more focused on telling them they have problems and asking them to find out what they are. So just like critical race theory approached race as, where is the racism? Let's go look for it. We know it's there, foregone conclusion, help us find it. It's like the highlights page of hidden pictures. And they're teaching kids as young as 6 to like, okay, come on kids, let's go find the racism. It's there, of course, that's a given, but let's go find it. You get rewarded when you do. Microaggressions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, good. A for you. You found the racism. Good. What, you didn't find any racism? You're a racist. Only a racist would not see the racism. That's critical race theory. That's what it sounds like. Okay. So then we had the gender stuff. Okay, let's find the transphobic people. It's trying to, you don't want the bathroom to be open to everybody? Okay, you must be transphobic. So where's the transphobic? It's foregone conclusion. It's there. So now we move on to okay, how is mental illness manifesting in your life? How is anxiety affecting you? How is depression affecting you? Who are the people you know who are suicidal? Not, these are the symptoms, this is what it is. If somebody is like this and you might want to talk to them, or if you feel this way, go talk to the counselor. Moving on to math now. No, we're going to infuse all of our subjects with discussion about mental illness. Like the default state is mental illness. So we do two things. We normalize it to where it's completely normal to have generalized anxiety disorder. That's like the minimum. That's like normie. It's completely normal to be depressed. Yeah. Aren't you? Like lots of people are depressed right now. So it would be totally normal if you were. So by discussing it all the time and normalizing it, the people who start to feel on the outs are the ones who don't have an identifiable mental illness. It starts to become a social currency, just like, yes, I'm an oppressed person in these 3 ways. I found myself in the intersectional chart and now I have victim status. This is another way for our kids to grasp that social currency of being on the intersectional chart so they can feel virtuous and fit in. We talk about mental health all the time except we're not talking about mental health, are we? We're talking mental illness. And there is research already. I'll have to go find it and post it somewhere in the community. But there is research that shows, especially among teenagers, that when there's one person who commits suicide, you're more likely to have others. It is, in a weird way, contagious. And so is mental illness self-identified. Because you start to feel like, well, maybe I just think I feel all right. Maybe I don't. Maybe this, I felt nervous the other day. Maybe that's anxiety. So they start talking about it so much, just like the racism, that you start to see it everywhere. You start to see it everywhere. You start to see it in yourself. You start to see it in your parents. Your parents worrying about what you're learning in school or what you're not learning in school. My mom, I think, has anxiety disorder. She's always worried about what's going on at school. Fill out this survey. So now we get the kids buying into all this, participating in all this, and seeing who? The school as the only place that validates me. They're the only people that understand me. The people at the school, the teachers. We have this wonderful advocacy group, and I'm part of it with my anxiety. And instead of seeing it as something you can recover from, it's something that you have or you declare that you have because there's status to it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen middle school kids have a weekly session. Actually, I think they met twice a week, maybe more, called advisory. And they said it's designed to get out ahead of social drama in the school. We're going to meet, we're going to discuss social dramas, things are going on, how they're feeling, blah, blah, blah. You know what it ended up being? Well, if you're an introverted kid, doesn't want to talk about your feelings in front of your peers all the time, which is most teenagers, you just kind of sit there silently. While the couple of kids who are exhibitionists or need a lot of attention, or, the ones who go on social media and be like, I'm so depressed, like all the time, they're the ones who sit there talking about how depressed they are and how they're not getting the validation for the depression. And of course, the teachers, they're not clinicians, who lead this. Oh, tell us more. Oh, have any of you felt that way? Da, da, da. And sometimes they'll say the depression stems from the fact that somebody in their peer group didn't listen when they wanted to share, didn't care when they needed a shoulder to cry on. And rather than counseling that person that their peers are not their therapists, and it is their peers have an agenda of their own, namely to learn and to grow and to move on in their lives, and they are not in the school to provide validation, emotional or otherwise, to their peers all day, every day. Instead of doing that and referring that kid to the counselor for, some private attention because clearly they need a lot of it, they turn to the kids who are allegedly boundaried and ask them why they're so boundaried. Why do you have these toxic boundaries? So it is any wonder that my kid got ganged up on for having strong boundaries because she didn't want to hear about somebody else's problems over and over and over at school, private time, etc. And that person then used cyberbullying to go after her? Is that any wonder? We're not teaching them to respect personal boundaries. We're teaching them share. Sharing is caring. And of course, sharing is sharing your time and your ear and your headspace for other people's problems too. When you won't do that, well, you must be selfish. You must be phobic. You're the one with the problem, not the one constantly emoting. So when parents step up to say, I don't like this, I don't think this is the role of school, and by the way, this takes up an enormous amount of time, energy, and money when the kids aren't really learning their academic subjects very well, the people trying to gaslight you and soften you up and soften you up and sort you, do it again. They move the ball farther down the field by now saying, here we go again with these people. They just don't want their kids to be healthy now. And they actually want kids to die of suicide. Clearly, they're a threat, not just to their own children, but to other people's children. We can't have them involved. We can't have them exposed to children, their own or anybody else's. Because look at them. They don't want people avoiding suicide. There's even a mom in this article who says that to expect, she says right here, this mother was outraged when she saw an email about parents complaining about this. She'd pulled her 12-year-old son out of the district after he reported thoughts of suicide after having been bullied by classmates for his sexuality. You can't expect just to teach kids arithmetic and reading and look at their test scores and expect them to be decent human beings. No, you can't. But it does not then follow that you can expect untrained teachers who are not licensed clinicians to turn them into decent human beings either. You can't. And your child may not be in the right school. And that's not to say that kids bullying them it's appropriate. No, it's not. But you can deal with that with those kids. We don't need to take the entire school and assume that they are abusive little bullies and behave accordingly. I personally cannot understand why a parent would not want their children to have knowledge of what depression looks like, what anxiety looks like. Okay, well, thank you for the straw man, but there are lots of parents who are not interested in having their kids discuss anxiety and depression at their school. Not appropriate. Okay, if you see signs of it in an individual child, then refer them to the counselor. But funny thing happens when you alert kids to what certain problems look like and sound like, and especially when you pay a lot of attention to the kids who say they have those things, is they see those problems where maybe they weren't. And that's what we're seeing. It's also invading their private headspace where you don't belong because, again, you're not therapists. But that's what's now being debated in communities across. No, it isn't. You see what they did there, how clever they were? That people are debating whether we want children to know what depression looks like or what anxiety looks like. That's not what we're debating. We're debating whether we want school to be the people who teach them that. The presumption that parents don't talk about that ever, or that we don't take a look at how our kids are doing and evaluate whether or not they need a therapist, is what's wrong here. The way they frame all of this is part of the plan. And what I'm going to say now, you might want to hear, but here it is. Stop going to school board meetings and yelling about this. I know a lot of people disagree with me. Like, no, we got to keep at it. It's working. I'm like, no, is it? Who's it working for? Have they pulled the CRT out of the classrooms? Have they pulled the SEL out of the classrooms anywhere? And people say, yeah, well, we canceled the contract for this or that. Did you pull it out of the teachers' heads? Did they just move the deck chairs around the Titanic or relabel the snake oil bottle? Because they did. Just letting you know, they did. All right. You might find an isolated school here or there with an isolated superintendent or principal that did something, and that won't last. On balance, we've not moved the needle one bit. It's too big. You're just the Rebel Alliance taking pot shots at the Empire, but you have not found the Death Star. You're not even close to the Death Star. So you're going to have to get more strategic, and that starts with getting your kid the hell out of there. Because they're going to keep sorting and they're going to keep identifying until they find you personally and your kid personally. Or until this stuff just affects your kid. So while you're busy yelling into the microphone, they still got custody of your kid and those ideas are still going into their head, or your kid's getting increasingly frustrated with you because now you're an embarrassment to them, or you're potentially causing backlash on them from their teachers and their peers because they know who you are. They know who you are. Their parents tell them who you are. You're going to become the PNG of the kid's peer group parents. And then their peer group won't be allowed to associate with them, and so forth and so on. And this is how it works. And this is all by design. So as long as your child is still there, they're at risk of any number of issues. And all of your fighting isn't helping them today. It isn't. And you might say, but okay, so go demand your money back. That should be the only thing you're loud about. And that's not done at the school board meeting. That's done with your legislators. And it's done with other parents. Go ahead and join the chapters of these groups. Please do. Then you're going to meet like-minded parents who are equally upset, but try to persuade them not to fight the people who are playing them like little game pieces on a game board, but to work together to create an alternative system, micro schools, pods, homeschooling co-ops. Pull your resources if you have to, and pull those resources to finance the campaigns of legislators who are going to pass laws that give you your money back, give you your parental rights back, not within the school paradigm, but outside of it. It's the only way. You need to go take your Rebel Alliance to a free planet somewhere. Now, I'd rather be in Firefly land. Go out into space, Find one of those unsettled planets or just fly around in space, find yourself a Firefly ship and get busy living. But if you think you are going to beat back the empire, you're not. You've got to drain the empire of its power, and its power comes from your children and the dollars attached to them. I'm sorry to be such a black pill dispenser, but this was predictable. This was predictable. I think you could go back to some of my videos in the past, and I said, get your kids out before they take them away from you, because the day is going to come where they just simply declare you unfit. And it could be a year from now. It could be 3-4 years from now. But in the meantime, your kid is marinating in this mindset. Do you want to spend the next 4 years fighting with people who are laughing at you behind your back and just looking in their notebook for like, what's the next one? Okay, the next one is, I can't tell you how many steps we are away from send DSS to your door, but we're getting closer. They just use these up and throw them away and go on to the next thing. So that's what I wanted to let you know today. As you get outraged looking at this stuff, remember that your outrage is their fuel, just like a narcissist. They want you angry. It makes you weak. They want you emotionally tied up in knots. But until you leave, they got you. They're not trying to win you over to where you're like, you're right, I'm happy now, everything's awesome. They just want to win you over so that you're scared and quivering and helpless and have nowhere else to go. And you'll shut your mouth completely so you can keep your kid living in your house. That's what they want. And those of us who've been in these kinds of abusive relationships recognize it for what it is right out of the gate. It's very obvious. But if you haven't, and congrats to you, I'm not wishing it upon you. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But that's probably why you still think you can make headway here. Because you've had healthy relationships and you can't conceive of people behaving this way. But they are. It's how they get power for power's sake. You are supply. Your anger doesn't bother them. It fuels them. Okay? So if you find this content useful, and I hope you do, I hope you consider subscribing to the channel. Like this video, comment on this video, share this video. That's the video.